Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Murtibeda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti 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 Om Okie dokie, namaste. Welcome, Tripura. Chapter 16. We have seen these beautiful teachings regarding the way consciousness manifests itself through the power of Maya. Yeah? So consciousness is unmanifest. It remains unmanifest as Maya Ishvara, and then it manifests through the Jiva-Atma with a state that is commonly referred as Samadhi. There are different kinds of Samadhis. But we know that consciousness is available to us, even as Samadhi, during the awakeful state. That's what we have seen so far. During the awakeful state, we have a Samadhi there. What is the Samadhi there? Is the light of consciousness before it engages a sought object to contract itself and produce likes and dislikes. So there is the illuminating phase, and then there is the deliberating, consideration phase. Consciousness unconditioned by thought and conditioned by thought, which unavoidably produce raga and vesha. So how to neutralize raga and vesha is the whole key here. So, and for that, we need to get a certain knowledge that resolves our mind, diminishing attraction and repulsion, likes and dislikes, desires and fears, diminishing it, and at the same time producing a state on which one consciously experiences the so-called samadhi. The Yana Samadhi, or the Samadhi of the Yoni, is a mind that is reflecting consciousness and engage on thoughts here and there, The engagement is not as dramatic, it's not as problematic, but the Yoni is aware of this undifferentiated consciousness that reflects in one's mind as Samadhi. So is it clear? Is it understandable? We all experience this natural Samadhi, Sahasya Samadhi, okay? It's a question of recognizing it and getting familiarized with it. And we know that in the wakeful state, it breaks up every time a thought. It's not continuous, In the nirvikalpa Samadhi, it's continuous. In deep sleep, it's continuous, that undifferentiated state of luminosity, okay? So the case of the Yoni, so the breaks up, occur, but they are not as problematic, and it's part of the game of life. But the Yoni is conscious. I am this light, and this light does not need to engage such subjects compulsively. You understand? This light of consciousness does not. Engagement with sought objects should be functional, should be something for the sake of my navigation or interaction with the world. So whenever I don't need to engage such objects, I just withdraw my attention and I remain in this state of rest, rest in consciousness, in reflected consciousness as pure reflected consciousness. Okay, and this resting in pure reflect consciousness is easier, as we realize I am fundamentally that original consciousness, which is not an experiencing entity, but provides me this experience of satisfaction, peace, as pure reflect consciousness in a certain state, often referred as samadhi. So we have seen these things in our previous life. And this talk gets only better as we move forward here. You will see the next chapter, the 17th, is really incredibly beautiful. Okay. Verse 73, this conclusion is admitted by the wise. Which conclusion? In sleep, the insentient phase of ignorance overpowers the sentient phase of deliberation. So in the state of deep sleep, as we know, the mind is not produced sentience. So deep sleep is the insentient phase of the illumination. And this ignorance overpowers the sentient aspects of illumination and deliberation. Here he puts only deliberation. Maybe he's putting, because in the wakeful state, we experience illumination without engagement with the thoughts, without consideration and deliberation, deliberated considerations. So in deep sleep, we don't have that. And then the mind is insentient. And it's overpowered by this ignorance. But the factor of illumination is always present. It's illuminating there, even in deep sleep. And then we had that beautiful analogy that the mirror, when it's covered by a huge layer of dust or tart, it's still there. So we say it's reflecting nothing. No, it's reflecting the very layer of dust or dust, but we don't see it. Okay? But if we would be between the dust and the mirror, and we will look to the mirror, we would see reflecting. So consciousness is that which is always ever present, as we know through the deep sleep as well, and samadhi, of course. The factor of illumination is ever present. And that reflected consciousness, that illumination alone is not apparent to man in the absence of deliberation. Okay, this is very profound, because what is deliberation? Is a thought process every time we get in contact with an object. So how are we going to recognize this illuminating principle, which is consciousness? But it's because it says it cannot become apparent to man in the absence of what? Of the intellect engaging thoughts that identify, the light of consciousness, without which I cannot think, without which I cannot feel, I cannot sense anything, and so on. Without which I could not, in retrospect, determine and establish that I had a wonderful experience in deep sleep. Therefore, sleep is said to be a state of ignorance, as distinguished from the wakefulness which is concealed and considered to be knowledge. Okay. Why sleep is a state of ignorance? Because we don't have our intellect at our disposal at that stage, at that state, in order to consciously extract the understanding that I am here, I am still illuminating the absence of the world, and but I can yet cognize that with my intellect. Okay, so all we take is a fragment. It's a residual memory of a satisfying experience that we had between dream and deep sleep and awakening state. This conclusion therefore, sleep is said to be the state of ignorance as distinguished from wakefulness, which is considered to be the state of knowingness, of knowledge, of consideration and deliberation, deliberated consideration or contemplation or reaction to the thoughts that appear in my mind. This conclusion is admitted by the wise also. Sleep is the firstborn from transcendence, and also called unmanifest, or the exterior, or the great void. So what the author is trying to say here, he makes reference to sloka 59 of the 14th chapter that we have recently studied. And it says that this conclusion of whatsoever the king was explaining to his disciple says that it is established by all wise beings, and which is sleep is the firstborn from transcendence. So the causal state of the universe is the first manifestation coming from the unmanifest Brahman. So it's the firstborn from transcendence. Transcendence is the absolute unmanifest. So we have to understand there are two levels of unmanifest. There is the unmanifest remaining as Maya Ishvara, which contains the two other universe, the dream and the wakeful universe. Yeah? So we have the macrocosmic unmanifest causal body of the universe. Yeah? And the sleep is a state of the Jiva-Atmas within this macrocosmic causal condition. Yeah? But it is manifest or unmanifest? It is unmanifest. So sleep, or the macrocosmic causal body or causal state, is the first manifestation coming from the transcendence unmanifest. So the absolute unmanifest is Brahman. It manifests as the seed of the universe, the causal body, in which we have our deep sleep state, okay? And this deep sleep state is also called the unmanifest. I don't know if this last sentence refers to the unmanifest transcendence or the sleep, but doesn't matter. Sleep is the firstborn from transcendence, the unmanifest Brahman, and it's also called the unmanifest, the exterior or the great void. Now, it's the macrocosmic causal body. Do you agree? The state prevailing in sleep is the feeling, the sense feeling, there is nothing, there is void, there is nothing, I experience nothing. The state prevailing in deep sleep is this sense feeling. This also prevails in the wakefulness, although things are visible. In the wakefulness, we engage in thoughts, objects, but in spite of that, there is a sense feeling that is in between, there is nothing. Okay? So what is the background? The background is this uninterrupted flux of consciousness, the illuminating power, this reflected consciousness. And then we see that we have all these breakups of things and thoughts which are visible to us. And it's also there in the wakefulness state. But this ignorance is shattered by the repeated upspringing of thoughts. The wise say that the mind is submerging in sleep because of its illumining. But this ignorance, the state prevailing in sleep, is the feeling there is nothing. This is also available in a wakeful state when we are dealing with thoughts and objects. But this ignorance is shattered by the repeated upspringing of thoughts. The total ignorance of deep sleep is shattered by our engagement in the wakeful state with thoughts. The wise say that the mind is submerged in deep sleep because it is illumining the unmanifest condition. So the mind is always illumining, and we are talking about reflected consciousness here. It's always illumining. It's illumining in the wakeful state the objects of the Vyavaharika. It's illumining the mental, the subtle state of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and recollections, memory. It's illumining there as well, okay? And then in the deep sleep, the wise say that the mind is submerged in sleep because it's illumining the unmanifest. So when it's there and it's illumining nothing or emptiness or the void or no objects, no feeling, no experience, we call it ignorance, because the mind is submerged in that state, the causal state. So when we move into dreams, what's happening? That ignorance is shattered by all the image flashing as in the dream world, our dreaming experience. And then the wakeful state comes, and again, it's going to be illuminating our thoughts, objects in relation to the physical material world. So the submersion of the mind is not, however, peculiar to sleep, for it happens also at the instant of cognition of things. There are many nuances, beautiful nuances in this state. The submersion, this state of the mind, of total rest, of illumination without illuminating any thoughts / objects. This submersion of the mind is not available only during sleep, for it happens also at the instant of cognition of things. So every time, as we have seen in the previous classes, every time there is a cognition of an object, of a thing, we are in the phase of cognition and consideration and deliberation, as it was put before. So we are already engaging a thought, feeling, and then our tendencies are already activated, okay? So this peculiar state, similar to deep sleep, also happens at the instant of the thoughts coming. What he's pointing out is that right in the moment that the mind is in that stage of pure reflective illumination without deliberation and consideration, okay, which is a function of our vasanas, tendencies, in that very short instant, we have the sleep state, which is more correctly understandable or understood as samadhi. Samadhi is sleep while awake. You understand? It's just remain as the light, the reflected consciousness, the light that reflects, the light of consciousness reflect in my mind, illuminating without engaging the specifics of any thought or object. In that moment, we experience sleep, or in that moment, we experience samadhi. In the moment of cognition, and then the moment that we engage that cognition, and then boom, and then we feel we get in contact, and then we feel like, oh, I lost my samadhi. Yeah? I lost my sleep. No? I shall now talk to you from my own experience. This subject is perplexing for the most accomplished person. So it's so subtle, it's so beautiful that to look into in which way we are experience this light of consciousness, experiencing, that is the experiential element that I often talk about, okay? I shall now talk to you from my own experience. This subject is perplexing to most people, even the wise. All these three states, namely samadhi. So now he presents three states. So he is going to remove the dream state, because the dream state has no value in this analogy here, okay? So we have three states: samadhi, sleep, and cognition of objects, okay? So we have these three states. Now, samadhi, which is similar to deep sleep, we're going to see the subtle difference between both, and the instant of mental activity, okay, which is a secondary phase. The first phase is illumining the object, and then right immediately after, we engage that thought, and then we go into the stage of consideration, yeah? And then our tendencies get activated. So all these three states, namely samadhi, sleep, and the very instant, and this instant of cognition, he's saying just before consideration and engagement, deliberation. Of these three states, namely samadhi, sleep, and the instant before cognition, objects are characterized by absence of perturbation. There is no disturbance. Why? I am just enjoying the reflection of pure consciousness without getting, engaged with thoughts and objects. So this is all point to what is the most valuable, which is the natural samadhi. The samadhi in the wakeful state. And the instant of cognition of objects is only possible in the wakeful state. Então, we are talking about sleep and wakeful. And he just neglects the dream state, because the dream states, it serves no purpose as far as self-recognition, self-knowledge. Their difference lies in the later recapitulation of the respective states, which illumine different perceptions. So what is the difference between samadhi and sleep, and the sleep in the awakened state? Because the instant of cognition of object is the wakeful sleep. So we have here samadhi, deep sleep, and a wakeful sleep. You are awake, but you are in samadhi. You are awake, but you are there, experiencing the world, but not engaging the world. You don't experience perturbation. The difference lies in the later recapitulation of the respective state. So the difference is what? In sleep, I'm going to, in retrospection, remember that state, and I will interpret that state from the standpoint of my mind, my vasanas, my conditioning, my degree of wisdom and understanding. Everybody interprets same experience differently. The difference lies in the later recapitulation of interpretation of those three states. Those three states which illumine different perceptions. Okay, perception of samadhi. Well, samadhi here is more pointing to nirvikalpa samadhi, of course, and then the perception of deep sleep, and that samadhi that occurs in between thoughts and objects, the moments in the mind is clear. So the difference lies in the recapitulation of those three states. Absolute reality is manifest in samadhi, a void or unmanifest condition, distinguished sleep, and diversity is characterized of cognition in wakefulness. So now from another angle, he's saying that the absolute reality, Turiya, or not Turiya, Tripura, the absolute reality is manifest, of course, in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, in which there is a void or unmanifest condition, distinguish sleep. Absolute reality is manifest in samadhi, okay? A void or the unmanifest condition is the characteristic of deep sleep, and diversity is the characteristic of the wakeful state as we contact the objects of the wakeful state. The illuminant is, however, the same all through the three states, is always unblemished. Therefore, it's said to be the abstract intelligence. So I'm trying to make a distinction here of these three states, including the state of samadhi, including the state of Sahaja Samadhi or Jnana Samadhi, okay, in which you are aware of this consciousness shining on your subtle body before or after you entertain a thought, okay? I'm trying to put it in terms of reflected consciousness, okay? But a lot of the time, it's said that our scriptures are going to collapse, okay, reflect consciousness in original consciousness. Why? Because ultimately it's the same. The same thing with the teachings regarding Brahman and Ishvara. Many times the texts collapse Ishvara in Brahman, or Ishvara 2 and Ishvara 1, you understand? Because they have the same nature. And here there is another indication of this point. The illuminant, which is this reflect consciousness being experienced by the Jivatma, is the same through the three states. Okay, so these states belong to what? Jivatma. Okay, so the illuminant aspect of consciousness experienced by the Jiva-Atma is the same through these three states, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, deep sleep, and within the wakeful state, those moments in which our mind is just there and we do not engage with the nama-rupas of the wakeful state, but we are just resting, in that contemplation of the illuminant aspect of my reflected consciousness or mind. Are you guys following? Any questions?
It's just that one has to really have a pure mind for this recognition. I mean, that's where all this so subtle, that little moment before the perturbation.
Yeah.
I love it that you're unfolding the experience of the Yanni. This is something.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. There are two ways for us to present the teaching, only from the standpoint of intellectual knowledge. And then we can present it, which is the beauty of this text. It presents again and again from the experiential aspect as well. Okay, not that the self is an object of experience, but once you know the self, you have a different experience in regards to yourself and your true nature and the world. So you say that we have to have a pure mind. Yes, but it's not, we don't need to have a 100% pure mind because such a thing does not exist. We need to have a contemplative mind, a focused mind, a good mind, so that we can follow the rationale of these teachings and apply the teaching. When we apply the teachings, we are moving into this spiritual element of the teachings, you understand? Aspect of the teachings. So we need to go, we need to see these teachings, remember this teaching, contemplate the teachings. If we have doubts, we resolve those doubts, and we keep working on it until we can not only understand it all intellectually, but we can begin to get the fruits of this intellectual self-knowledge, you understand? And then we can put it to the test. Yes, it has transformed the way I interact with this world. It has transformed the way I relate to this instrument of experience, the body-mind. This illuminant is reflected consciousness, and the Nisargadatta Maharaj used to say pure consciousness, but he was referring to pure reflected consciousness because he was in a state in which he was aware of the illuminant aspect of reflected consciousness, human consciousness, without entertaining thoughts and objects. So when I got in contact to Vedanta, I said, oh, Nisargadatta Maharaj did not understand anything, you know. And then later on, I had to come back and say, no, now I understand better, you know, what he was saying. And here I am again in a moment, you say, wow, you see, that's what Nisargadatta was pointing to. So stay as the pure reflection of consciousness. He was not using reflection, but to say pure consciousness. He could have said pure human consciousness, or he was saying pure. To be experiential, it can only be a reflection, because only the reflection is producing the Jiva Atma and its experiences. No? The illuminant is, however, the same all through these three states. And therefore, it's said to be the abstract consciousness or intelligence. So here we are taking the state of reflect consciousness through these three states, and it say it's the same, it's unblemished, it does not change, it does not modify. The illumining aspect is there as a witnessing subject, witnessing consciousness, okay, which is again a feature of reflect consciousness. So the illuminant is, however, the same. It does not do anything, it does not change, it's the same. That's what it means, the same. Therefore, it's said to be of the same nature of abstract consciousness or Brahman. You understand? Because we have these features in regard to our nature in the unmanifest Brahman, and Nisargadatta Maharaj used to refer as the absolute. So our true nature, you know, in the absolute or the abstract consciousness is what? Is unchanging and is always present, and it is never changed from moment to moment. And if we take these teachings, you know, and we observe them carefully, we see that those features are also available in our human experience. Otherwise, self-knowledge would have no value in itself. Okay, so my nature as witnessing consciousness, which is a feature of Jivatma, reflect consciousness, in which I feel that, yes, I don't change. I'm not affected by my experience, and I don't do anything. I am just witnessing consciousness, and I'm the only reality. So this experience, okay, is an experience of my absolute nature, which not available for experience, but it somehow it releases a certain fragrance that allows me the benefit of self-knowledge, so that I experience the features that belongs to my absolute nature in my relative nature as a Jivatma. You understand? Samadhi is sleep, and samadhi and sleep are obvious because their experience remains unbroken for some appreciable period and can be recapitulated after waking up. So now the authors say that in samadhi and sleep, the experience is unbroken, it's continuous, okay? And then in retrospect, we can see, oh yes, of course, I had an experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Oh, I have an experience of deep sleep, and it was wonderful. So I can't miss it because, as he says here, it is unbroken, okay? It's continuous. And then I can recognize and appreciate, although my intellect is not consciously present, but the experience is so visible in the sense that it's not fragmented by thought. But imagine the same illuminating consciousness operating in the mind of Jiva, unqualified Jiva, like Lynn was saying. And we need to be qualified. We have to have a pure mind. Consciousness reflects in an absolutely impure mind. Okay, so it's going to be recognizable. Very difficult, because the impure mind is going to be engaging thoughts, feelings all the time, emotion, and that gives almost no chance, possibility for recognition of the common background of consciousness in its illuminating feature. You understand? Because we are, but the experience of deep sleep in samadhi is more easily recognizable because of its unbroken nature for a period of time. And it can be recapitulated after the experience. That of cognition of objects remains unrecognized because of its fleeting nature. So the state in between thoughts, we are recognizing objects again and again, thoughts and objects fleeting and again. So these thoughts, fleeting, distractive nature of the impure mind is going to make it impossible to cognize the underground flow of consciousness, of reflect consciousness, illuminating thoughts. Is almost as consciousness, my human consciousness is illuminating thoughts, but somehow is so obsessed, as if, the Jivatma is so obsessed with engaging, entertaining thoughts that cannot see anything else. Well, and it's a huge crowd. It's thought. There is almost no room in which this light can flash. It becomes a distraction. The mind is all the time jumping and engaging. Therefore, this nature of consciousness reflected in the pure mind cannot be recognized in a pure mind, because there is a constant flux of fleeting, changing thoughts, distractive thoughts. The awakeful state is colored in a changing flux with thoughts. The wakeful state is, I don't like to use contamination, but it would be somewhat appropriate here. The wakeful state, which is consciousness reflect, which is illuminating nature and engaging, considering and deliberately considering nature. The wakeful state is somehow covered up or colored, with this continuous flux of thoughts and feelings, engagement. In between samadhi and sleep, we have the wakeful state. And the wakeful state is colored by this experience of thoughts, of recollections, of experience. When men, when they awake, can detect fleeting sleep because they are already conversant with its nature. So the bottom line here is, even in the wakeful state, we have this fleeting samadhi, which happens in between those engagements, okay, with the thoughts and the objects. So in the wakeful state is the state in which we need to recognize intellectually and also observantly, if I can use this word, okay? We can see these fleeting gaps of the illuminating aspect of my consciousness as it reflects in a mind without producing thoughts and attractive thoughts or repulsive thoughts. I have neutralized most of the attraction for thoughts and repulsion to thoughts. Now my mind is more pure, and then I can more easily recognize the samadhi. Why? Because the engagement, the entertainment with thoughts and feelings become less and less. And this illuminating aspect of my human consciousness becomes more and more available, okay? More and more available. We want to recognize this pure reflect consciousness so that we establish that this reflect consciousness is my true nature in the absolute, is my true nature as pure, limitless consciousness, which is not an experiencing entity, but my true nature. Otherwise, we remain stuck with a pure reflective mind, and we are not going to let go of the experiencing instrument, the agent, afraid that if I lose the agent of experience, I'm going to lose my pure reflected consciousness. So we need to let go of sattva. We need to let go of samadhi and say, no, I establish myself as the original consciousness, and I do not depend on any instrument of experience. The instruments of experience are means by which I can recognize my true nature in the unmanifest Brahman as Brahman. It's that radical, and that's why people in the spiritual world all think that we are crazy. We Vedantins, you understand? They think that we are arrogant. I know I am that Brahman, you understand? But it's the only way to resolve the human condition. And the author says, men, when they awake, when people awake, they can detect the fleeting sleep. The fleeting sleep is the awakeful sleep in which the mind is recognized in its illuminating feature, not entertaining any thought object. So in the awakeful state, we can detect these moments of samadhi between two engagements, between two deliberations or considerations of thoughts, Why we can recognize that? Because we are already conversant with its nature. We are conversant with the nature of the sleep state. I guess that's what he's trying to say. Yes, so we can more easily recognize the gaps of sleep in between engaging mental activity. That's the whole thing about meditation. I want to find those gaps between engagement with thoughts object, and it somehow is very pleasant. It calms my mind, and it feels good, and so on. So I can find that, and it's a sort of sleep. Yeah? I can detect the fleeting sleep between thoughts because I'm more familiarized with the sleep state. But recognize the samadhi in between the states is more difficult. Why? Because the people not familiarized with samadhi, it's altogether a different concept. Huh? Deep sleep is characterized by what? Total ignorance. Yeah, you say, oh, okay, I was not thinking about anything, I was totally, But samadhi is not really a state of total ignorance, and we're going to see more and more the distinction between samadhi and deep sleep in here. So the fleeting samadhis, which is slightly different from those fleeting sleep from the standpoint of the interpretation of the Jiva Atma, the samadhis between a mind resolved, not engaging in the deliberation or consideration or engagement with thoughts, no? But just as a pure reflection of consciousness, is not recognized by people because people has no idea of original consciousness and pure reflected consciousness. All they know is there is sleep and there is awake state and there is the dream state. And then the Upanishad comes and says there is another condition, or there is another state, which is samadhi state, which is not the self. But from the experiential side of things, the experiential level is the best we can have in terms of experience. I'm experiencing something which is different from the ignorance of the sleep, okay? But I need to be conversant. I need to be familiarized with this concept, this understanding that the mind can be resolved without developing tamoguna in which it is totally ignorant. The samadhi is a totally wakeful state in which the mind is dominated for more sattva guna, but yet not engaging into thought process, consideration, deliberations, and engagements. Therefore, fleeting samadhi goes undetected most of the time, or Brahmin. Fleeting samadhi is indeed being experienced by you at all times. So the king is telling the guy, I forgot his name, the son of the sage. Fleeting samadhi goes undetected because you are not familiarized with it. Knowledge. So you did not get the knowledge that there is another state, not only 3 states, but there are 4 states. And the 4th state is what? Samadhi. Samadhi. Is samadhi the ultimate purpose of life? No, it's the bonus by having reached the ultimate purpose of life, which recognizing your true nature. You can get it as by effort, by discipline and controlling the mind. But that is not going to resolve the mind completely from our point of view, from the point of view of our sampradaya, our knowledge, our scriptures. And we somehow we can observe that people who likes to get into samadhi by means of controlling the mind and discipline and so on, hate to come out of that state, which is a sign of limitation. You understand? It means to say, when I'm awakeful, my mind comes back to become disturbed again, because the engagement, the thoughts, all these impressions, mental, emotional impressions, they are not really resolved by nirvikalpa, 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 because it was never really addressed. Although the Yog says that nirvikalpa samadhi purifies the mind, and there is something to it, because it purifies to the extent that someone who has a huge vasana for nirvikalpa samadhi and stays there, it's going to burn most of its vasanas, because the vasanas need to be nourished with our engagement, entertainment, involvement, right? So if I neglect my vasana because I have a huge vasana for nirvikalpa samadhi, this huge vasana is going to go at the cost of the other tendons. And then I have a huge vasana called nirvikalpa samadhi. Now, what I'm going to do with this vasana? It's still a vasana that did not produce aham brahmasmi. It produced like the ultimate goal is nirvikalpa samadhi. And it's easy to me now because I have pursued that for the past 578 incarnations. And now I'm established in nirvikalpa samadhi. But we don't see it the ultimate purpose or goal. But here is presented as the fourth state so that we can understand this fourth state samadhi, because from there we can really understand that Jiva-Atma is Paramatma. Reflected consciousness in its purity is of the same nature of original consciousness, so that later on we can recognize that reflect consciousness, even engaged in thought, is of the same nature as limitless original consciousness. But first, we need to see consciousness, understand consciousness, and sense consciousness in its purity as pure sattvic, pure reflect consciousness, so that we can get familiarized with it and say, yes, this is the highest value of life, is to experience peace, satisfaction, contentment. And for that, I need a pure mind. But once I have enjoyed a pure mind, we need to make the best possible use of pure mind by entertaining the Mahavakyas of the Upanishads until it's clear to me that this reflect consciousness is the original consciousness. And now it's clear. And now I don't depend on effort to produce this sense of satisfaction, because as we say, knowledge is that which is always good. Once we know 2 + 2 = 4, we don't need to make any effort to establish that again and again and again. No? Or Brahmin, fleeting samadhi is available through all, experienced by all at all times. Even, look at this one here. He's saying exactly what I was trying to point out. Even when you are very rajasic and busy, engaging the world, even in your most busy moments, this consciousness is there. But if you tell rajasic people, unqualified people, people with impure intellect, that you are consciousness, and even when you are stressed out and you are doing, having violent reactions, and you are consciousness and all is good, so you are that, relax. No? So if you say that to someone, it's not going to happen in most cases. Why? The people has to go gradually understanding, the value of the pure qualified mind, which easily recognize this illuminating aspect of reflect consciousness, so that can more easily establish this pure reflection of consciousness is identical, IKEA, to my original limitless consciousness. Every instant free from thoughts and musings in the wakeful state is the condition of samadhi. I used to be fascinated with this expression, natural state, in my early days. And I did not understand that. And at the time, I was not associating that to Sahaja Samadhi. Later on, I understood, that is Sahaja Samadhi. Okay. So, but how come I experience it here and there, or as a byproduct of my meditations? And then slowly, everything became clear after Vedanta. Every instant that my mind is not engaging compulsively, unnecessarily, okay? Thoughts, in my wakeful state, I'm in that condition of samadhi. So, and then the next question is, okay, so how to get to that condition, a contemplated mind which sees things without triggering likes and dislikes? How to bring about that state, that condition in the wakeful state? It's free from thoughts. So that's what I want, because I want to enjoy my life. I want to live in that state. And then we have a crossroad there which takes people into the path of yoga, samadhi yoga, and in the path of self-knowledge through Vedanta and the Upanishads. Because ultimately, it's my understanding and observation that the greatest purifier of the mind is knowledge, self-inquiry. Why self-inquiry is even more efficient in purifying the mind? Because when we do these teachings, when we do follow the logic of the teachings, we are addressing all different aspects of the ignorance which turns the mind or produce impurity into the mind. So ignorance in respect to the nature of Mithya and the nature of Satya, ignorance in respect to Mithya nature as Ishvara, Jiva, and Jagat, and the laws and principles structuring and maintaining Mithya. So this entire spiritual ignorance is going to produce what? Perturbation, disturbance, thoughts, because I don't understand anything. I don't understand Mithya, I don't understand Satya, I just know that I want to have peace of mind. But unless we understand, the mind is never going to be properly resolved, because this understanding has to go so deep to the point that it neutralizes this tendency, this avidya tendency to run for or against objects of experience as a means to resolve my mind. I want what I want, and I don't want what I do not want, and I want to control my field of interaction so that I resolve my mind, indirect, trying to control something which is impossible to control. One has to understand the whole system and say, no, I need to resolve that ignorance at its roots, okay? So I'm gonna follow these teachings for weeks, months, years, until this ignorance that extroverts my mind and makes me running again and again for happiness, outside in the field of experience can be neutralized so that I can be naturally in the state of samadhi. So what is the best purifier? Samadhi yoga or Jnana yoga, Vedantic Yoga yoga? So I find that the best treatment to any illness is not to address the symptoms, but it goes to the root cause of the illness. The illness. Okie dokie. So we stop here. Today, we're going to meet again in 2 days, Thursday. Okay. We're going to continue from verse 8-7. Anything from you guys?
I was thinking, Arlindo, you were saying original consciousness can't be experienced by reflected consciousness. And yet we can, in a way, experience it through the knowledge, like you say, and also we can be aware of it. You know, we can, like you say, we can be aware of it constantly shining there. The original consciousness, always. This is what we were, you know, talking about today. Always forever shining.
Yeah, and the only distinction that I like to make, Mark, is that consciousness cannot be experienced, but it can be inferred as we experience its reflection in a pure mind. You can get the knowledge with an impure mind, but then you are not going to get all the benefit of self-knowledge because your mind is going to be perturbed or disturbed. You understand? The get the knowledge with an unqualified mind is going to produce a huge blow of purification, but the more purified is the mind, the more is the benefit. The only thing I want to bring again to this, what you say is the same thing. We need the fruits of self-knowledge is the experiential element of self-knowledge, okay? But we need to keep it clear that what I'm experiencing is consciousness reflected in my own intellect, and I can assert directly through, not only through faith in the Upanishadic teachings, but by my own direct knowledge that this reflect consciousness is equal to original consciousness of limitless nature, okay? Jivatma is Paramatma, no? So the only thing is, it is reflect consciousness. It's the experience is only possible for the reflected entity, which is the Jivatma, okay? So Brahman does not have a subtle body to make him or her, howsoever we want to see it, an experiencing entity. Brahman or Turiya or Tripura is not there experiencing ecstasy, peace. It's beyond knowledge and ignorance and all its effects, pain, pleasures and pains, you know. So what we experience as we experience is reflect consciousness, and then we have the potential to understand that reflect consciousness is of the same nature of original limitless consciousness, and then I have the possibility to own my nature as Ananda, not only as an existing entity, not only as a conscious entity, but as limitless entity, okay? Although I'm not an entity in my limitless nature. Okay? Very good.
Yeah, thanks for that, Arlindo.
Thank you. We meet again soon. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purna Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste. See you coming Thursday. Love you. See you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.